We have another hero. Now, it's very interesting that our archaeological heroes are so dispersed. A Frenchman, this is actually King Zahir Shah, who was the ruler of Afghanistan in the 1950s and 60s, a very educated man. He always had a stack of National Geographics on his desk. I kind of like that. He knew a lot about this. And he knew that Afghanistan was ruled by Greek kings back after the time of Alexander the Great, and that there were 8 cities founded by Alexander himself, all of them named Alexandria, of course. Alexander named them. But nobody had ever found these cities. They were mythical. We knew about them from history. We knew about them from coins. And one day in 1960, King Zahir Shah was on a hunting expedition in northern Afghanistan and came across this rock. And he knew that it was something very special. It's actually the carved stone capital from a Greek building. And he, for the first time in 1960s, found one of the fabled Greek cities, we call them Greco-Bactrian cities, founded by Alexander the Great. It's a huge city, over 2 miles in length. This is what the archaeologists found, and this is how we reconstruct it. A whole Greek city with a theater and temples and palaces. Amazing. Throughout the 1960s and 1970s, archaeologists excavated this Greek city and found wonderful things. Found Greek statues. Greek artisans came to Afghanistan and taught the local artisans how to create sculpture, naturalistic sculpture, and taught them. And this type of art stayed and became part of the historic traditions of Afghanistan, became part of the art historical traditions. They brought writing. Greek writing came to Afghanistan, and long after the Greeks left, this writing still was part of Afghanistan's past. Simply amazing that now we had real proof of the archaeological heritage of Alexander the Great in Afghanistan. All these finds went and were housed in the Kabul Museum in Afghanistan. It was becoming the pearl of the Silk Road in terms of archaeology, the go-to place for any archaeologist or historian interested in trade or the Silk Road. Another major find in Afghanistan was this, same time period, 1st century AD, but further north. Here are some Afghans who are looking down into a pit, and you wonder, what are they looking at down there? There's another hero of Afghan's archaeology, this time a Russian, Viktor Sarianidi. And what are these people looking at? They're looking at Viktor's excavations, his discovery of 6 intact nomadic people from northern Afghanistan from the 1st century, bejeweled in more than 21,000 pieces of gold. Unbelievable that this was found. This is one of the latest excavations that was done in Afghanistan. It was found in 1978. They excavated through the winter of 1979, and they found 6 burials, a find of world importance. Here's Viktor investigating some of these finds. He just found bowl after bowl, jewel after jewel. Many of these you can see in the exhibition upstairs here at the Canadian Museum of Civilization. However, when Viktor found these in 1978-79, something else was going on in Afghanistan. At that very time, chaos was brewing on the edges. There was civil war that was impending. The Soviets were about to invade over the border into northern Afghanistan. Viktor knew that he had no time to spare. He had to work through that winter, and finally in February of 1979, it became too difficult. He had to flee northern Afghanistan, and he took this gold. He tells me the story. He put them in paper bags, got in a local bus, and went down incognito to Kabul. And they quickly inventoried these objects, counted each and every one of them, all 21,000 pieces of gold, and then hid them away. Because the Civil War meant that the museum had to be closed. There was no more archaeological research. It was years again until Viktor saw these artifacts again. And then, by the early 90s, real tragedy happened. The museum got hit by a bomb. It was a terrible situation. This pearl of Silk Road archaeology, this warehouse of trade and understanding about our own past, connections east and west, was hit. Look at the museum. It lost its roof, it lost its windows, and inside, of course, there were no artifacts. Even the data sheets the records of the artifacts from the museum itself were burned and destroyed. It was really a dark day for Afghanistan. We scholars, we all wrote about this tragedy, about how the Kabul Museum was destroyed, about how everything was gone. The museum was empty inside. We didn't know what to do because it was a terrible situation. We wrote articles on the internet, in Archaeology magazine, in newspapers saying, the Museum of the Silk Road is destroyed. If these artifacts are anywhere, please recover them. Not only that, but archaeological sites themselves were destroyed during the Civil War. Here's our Greek city, the city of Alexander the Great. Look what happens in war. The whole city is destroyed. These are looters' pits. It's just terrible what happens in a war. We really needed to help this poor country in dealing with this. We didn't know what. For years, we wondered, what happened to these treasures of the Silk Road? We invited Victor Sarinidi to come to major universities in North America and talk about this. And we told the story of the 21,000 pieces of gold. Victor even told the story of this first to the public on the pages of National Geographic. Here's his article called The Golden Hoard of Bactria. Bactria is what we call northern Afghanistan. And it's here for the first time he told the story of these 6 nomadic burials in a public area. And we still wondered what happened to them. We were pretty sure that everything had either been lost, stolen, or melted down. That all changed in 2003. After the Taliban were thrown out, then all of a sudden stability came to Afghanistan. And for the first time, it seemed like we might be able to peek back into the museum. And it was a very interesting day. It was, I was just coming back from an expedition. I was working at other places. I was doing an underwater expedition into the Black Sea with Bob Ballard, looking for shipwrecks. Hadn't thought about Afghanistan for a while, but I came back from that expedition and I was sitting in my kitchen. It was August 25th, 2003. I remember that day very clearly. And I heard a radio report on the BBC. And the radio report said that the newly appointed president of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai, was snooping around in his presidential palace. And in the basement, they found an intact bank vault. And in the bank vault was the gold of Afghanistan's central bank. Well, this was what the BBC report was. And at the very end of the report, they said, and there were some museum boxes from the National Museum there too. Oh, that caught my attention. I didn't know what to do. I figured, oh my goodness, gold of Afghanistan, museum boxes? I quickly called Victor in Moscow. I said, Victor, do you think that the Bactrian gold, your golden tombs from Afghanistan, could be safe in a bank vault in Kabul? Well, Victor didn't know. He was on his way to his own excavations in Turkmenistan. He said, Fred, why don't you figure this out? And I really didn't know what to do. So I thought about this, and all of a sudden, I thought about this article from National Geographic, and I had this idea. I said, all right, you know, everybody keeps their National Geographics forever, right? You've got them in your garages. People still remember this article. This was March 1990. I got in touch with the editor of National Geographic. I said, hey, you know, maybe we could conclude this article, because it ended it said, the article ended with the words, look well on these photographs because the artifacts are gone, ... I said, why don't we conclude this, you know, just 13 years later, right? So they said, fine, we'll send you to Afghanistan and you write a one paragraph little thing, we'll put it in the magazine. So they sent me to Kabul.